Welcome back to another bonus episode. This is a very special episode for me. I'm going to read off a little thing off the top and then we'll get started. This episode is because April is Autism Awareness and Acceptance Month, and then April 2nd, tomorrow, is World Autism Day. So I'll read out my little kind of thing at the top and then we'll talk more about it. April's Autism Acceptance and Awareness Month. It is a time to celebrate the beauty of neurodiversity and the unique perspectives that individuals with autism bring to our communities. The butterfly symbolizes transformations and growth, reminding us that every individual deserves the opportunity to spread their wings and thrive. Let's embrace the tapestry of differences that make our world a richer place to live. Inclusion is not just a word, it's a commitment to understanding and valuing each person's unique contributions. By fostering a culture of acceptance and love, we create spaces where everybody is seen and heard. It is essential to educate ourselves and others about autism through science-based information, breaking down stereotypes and misconceptions that lead to misunderstanding. Knowledge is power, and together we cultivate a supportive environment for all. Let's come together as a community to celebrate diversity and promote acceptance. Share stories that amplify those on the spectrum and encourage open conversations. By building understanding and compassion, we can create a brighter future where everyone is embraced for who they are. So without divulging too much about my personal life, autism is a huge part of it. I have someone in my household who has autism. This person I love more than anything in this world. It's not my place to share who it is. They'll share their own story. But as a person, autism is my everyday life. It affects everything I do because this person means the world to me, and I love them more than anything. They're the closest person to me, and I feel like it's my responsibility and to use my platform, as tiny as it is, to talk about autism, spread awareness, help kind of break down some of those misunderstandings, and obviously I'll filter that through the lens of film and art because that's sort of the niche I do it with. But I feel like film humanizes stories and can often bring kind of a face and an awareness to it in which other mediums aren't always able to. You can read a book about something, you can hear news articles, and it doesn't really humanize it in the same way that film does. So for those who don't know, autism spectrum disorder is a diverse developmental condition. Hallmarks are persistent challenges with social communication, restricted interest, and repetitive behavior. Autism is lifelong, and it is not a disease, it's a disability. The needs for services and support are specialized and vary greatly person to person. Autism is no longer viewed as a scale. Previously, it was like high functioning, Asperger's syndrome, and then a trajectory to low functioning. So this is like nonverbal, people who are never able to live on their own, that kind of thing. So that was how we used to view autism. And that's not how it's viewed anymore. Autism is a spectrum, and my favorite way, and I think the most kind of accurate way in which I've been taught, and this is by, doctors, medical professionals, physiotherapists, occupational therapists, speech therapists, behavioral analysts. So these are the people I work with like on a day-to-day basis for this person in my life. Is looking at it like a color wheel. So we have all the different like colors in their various shades, and each shade represents something like social communication, sensory difficulties, these are just physical limitations, that kind of stuff. And so each person is going to have varying shades of their needs of support in that. And everybody's color wheel looks different. And so that's what's really important to keep in mind when talking about autism and learning about autism. There is no one way that autism looks. Autism is kind of a cluster of different things that people need support with, that all make up sort of this beautiful, colorful tapestry of neurodiversity. We're still learning a lot about autism. Autism did not enter like kind of the zeitgeist in terms of diagnosis, I believe, until the 1950s. So we haven't even had 100 years of like autism research. Obviously, the treatment of people and the way we discussed autism, particularly in the 20th century, was really, really harmful, and it was really poor understanding. For a long, long time, people were under the assumption that people with autism did not desire social interaction, did not desire communication, and had difficulty. There's a ton of institutionalization. People were often taken away from their families. There's a great deal of shame surrounding having somebody with autism in your family or as a child. And that's not what we do anymore. And so that's really important to remember. And it's important to remember that autism and people with autism do desire connection and do desire, to be, the valuable part of the community that they are. There's just a different way of experiencing the world through neurodiversity. It is important as somebody who is neurotypical to understand that our world is set up for people who are neurotypical and have compassion and understanding and try to be, we need to make our world a place where everybody is able to thrive. And right now, our world isn't that way. It is completely set up for neurotypical people. So it's important to support people, support their families, encourage their voices to be heard so that we can be accepting and then help create a space where everybody feels comfortable, which is very much not how our world works right now. Autism was very poorly understood even in, the 90s when I was a kid. I have never been diagnosed with autism. My mom took me in 3 separate times to doctors when I was a kid. The first time she took me in, and this is in like 1999, so this isn't like that long ago, really. Like I'm almost like I'm like 30. Like this isn't a long time ago. Like I'm a millennial. The first time she took me in, she was told that girls don't have autism. Another time she was told, because my mom's highly educated, that professional women always think there's something wrong with their children. And then she was also told that I was just weird. I'm weird, I'm different, I don't have autism. And then it wasn't until I got older and I was diagnosed with various things like OCD and things like that I finally had a therapist that was like, I don't think you have any of these things. I think you have autism. Now, I live in British Columbia, Canada, and the way it works as an adult, it's very, very hard to get diagnosed with autism, and you have to do it privately, and it's about $4,000. Now, I'm an adult. I have learned ways in which to navigate the world. I have to take a lot of breaks. I take a great deal of naps. I spend a lot of time in sensory reducing scenarios. I wear headphones a ton. The people in my life are like, when I told people that my therapist thought I had autism, my best friend in the whole world, we've been best friends since we were like 11, said, she was like, you haven't been diagnosed with autism? And I was like, no, why? And she's like, I've always thought you had autism. And I was like, for how long? She's like, since middle school. So I've never been formally diagnosed because at this point I'm an adult. And I'm obviously able to function within reason, and $4,000 is like not money I have kicking around. I think later in life, maybe I'll pursue a diagnosis should I have, financially moving into a different lane. But right now, it isn't something I feel like I need to formally have because I'm not the label. I don't know at this point what kind of thing I would get out of it. There's no supports available really for an adult here. So be kind of just putting a label on it. I've learned to function. So I operate under like sort of like a neurodiversity umbrella for myself when I'm trying to work through life, but there's nothing formally diagnosed, but that's sort of my history with my own personal experience of neurodiversity and autism. Social connection is not easy. I have obviously with this podcast have super niche interests in film. I have super niche interests. I have a really hard time kind of navigating the world, but I'm like most of the time fine. And then I have, a very, very close immediate family member in my household who does have diagnosed autism, who was diagnosed really, really early at 2. So that is, my relationship to autism as a whole. So I feel like there's a possibility maybe that's going on for me, but primarily my advocacy for autism remains as a family member. And I feel like it is my job to amplify the voice of my family member. And the way that I feel like I know how to do that best is kind of through advocating through the arts. And then, of course, in my personal life, I do day-to-day basis and in terms of education and when discussing autism and things like that. But I just wanted to give you kind of a background on that without divulging too much into my family members. stuff because I feel like that's their story to tell. But I do think it's important, like as somebody who's a family member of somebody with diagnosed autism, to advocate and to talk about it and to talk about when we can do better. It's very close to my heart. Autism affects every waking moment of my day. And that has come with its challenges. And then like this really special way of seeing the world that has brought to light like so much. It has given me this like amazing gift of this person, and I wouldn't change them for the world. And I think often like when people talk about it, they're like, oh, do you wish that this person was different or they didn't have autism? Or we talk a lot about how hard it is and all this kind of stuff. And I just don't feel that way because this person wouldn't be this person if they didn't have autism. Like, and like, how can I don't wish this person to be anything but themselves. And so it's up to me to like learn about it and to understand what's going on. And, I wouldn't change them for the world. Autism isn't this like death sentence disease. It is just, it's a disability. It's a way of, viewing the world that's different from quote unquote neurotypical or, what people deem as like a normal, which I hate using that word because I feel like everybody's normal and there isn't one definition of normal, but that's been my own journey with it. And I feel like it's important to advocate for like the misconception that like autism is this like horrible thing. It's not. What is horrible is the like lack of support for people with autism, the lack of public awareness, and then the like complete misconception about how autism comes to fruition, the anti-vax bullshit that people put into the universe. That's coming at you, RFK. Fuck you. You've made it so much worse with people with disabilities. I think a lot of conservative politics and a lot of taking away of DEI. And, that's really scary for people who have autism and people like myself who have family members with diagnosed autism because you're like, we've made like progress in the last little while that's just being absolutely just ripped back, which is scary because we don't want to go back to this like previous way of how we talked about disabilities and people with autism and stuff like that. So yeah, I'm here advocating and I feel like it's really important. So please, please, please educate yourself from reputable sources. Medical professionals is obviously the best way to gain information, medical journals, medical articles, and then speaking to people in your life. Because I guarantee there's somebody in your life that's affected, by autism, whether or not that's a family member or, of course, obviously your best way of learning about autism is through inclusion and having conversations with people who have autism, and learning about them, not necessarily being like, you're not doing like an interview or whatever, but like how by ensuring that these people are included in our lives and our communities, and it helps us all understand a bit better, and then we can be a bit more compassionate and advocate for them. Because not all people on the spectrum are able to advocate for themselves. Oftentimes we hear a lot from quote unquote like people with what is called lower support needs, what we used to be called high functioning Asperger's. Like that's the kind of the loudest voices in the community, because obviously with people with greater support needs, oftentimes there is, it comes with being nonverbal. And it's very hard to advocate for yourself when you're not able to speak. So we need to help be the voices for those people in our community. So today I'm talking about one of the most famous examples, and actually the first time there was ever a mainstream character in like a major motion picture for autism, which is Raymond. This movie came out in 1988, and it follows the story of Charlie Babbitt, who with the death of his father discovers his brother Raymond exists. And he's been institutionalized since Charlie was a toddler. And he's been kept secret. Dustin Hoffman plays Raymond, the brother with autism. I'm going to cry through all of this. I just know it. Such a place of wanting Raymond to be as authentic and real as possible. And you can tell that Raymond in this film we never are meant by the filmmakers or anything to look down on Raymond. Ever. Raymond is displayed in a way that is, at least to a 1980s standpoint, as multidimensional as possible. What the film displays is pointing out the issues around Raymond that are not Raymond specific. Raymond is viewed as being not a character that requires change or needing to change in order to fit in or do better. Raymond is fine exactly how he is, and it's how the other characters interact with him and their understanding of autism that is the problem in the film, not Raymond himself, which I think is exceptionally progressive for 1988. And a lot of that translates really well to now. Just a warning about the film. A lot of the language used is very much what would have been like a 1998 version of it. There's a ton of use of the R word, and idiot, which is terrible and obviously not what we were doing in 2025. You know, even medical textbooks that I read from like 10 years ago, which is not that long ago, used like mental R word as like, if that's something that's going to really bother you, I don't recommend this movie, but I think it's important to, when viewing this film, understand that it's from 1988 and we have made massive leaps in terms of research and our understanding and updating of our language since then. And so especially for younger viewers that like that word was like thrown around really comfortably up until like 10 years ago. And if you're from like a smaller town, even more recent than that. I grew up in a very small town. They adapt very slowly to language changes. So you know, it is jarring. It's important to talk about that there is criticism from the autism community about Raymond's character because he is considered quote unquote a savant or high functioning. And he has almost like a magical skill when it comes to numbers in terms of like he's able to like instantly do like really complex math. He's actually based on a real person who had this skill that the writers spent time with and Dustin Hoffman spent time with. So it's important to understand that Raymond is like one particular way that autism can present, and it can't be applied to everybody, and people require greater support needs than that. Neurodivergence is as diverse in presentation as neurotypical is. Even through modern media, there hasn't been a lot of variation. We see a lot of this like savant, quote unquote, when talking about autism. This is a good example of that is like the Good Doctor television show, which these like high achieving surgeons and things like that we see in modern media. We don't have a great representation of those with greater support needs or people who are nonverbal, and we need to do better going forward. But I think it is important when talking about this film to understand that this is the first mainstream film that has autism in it. It has an autistic character and autistic protagonist. So it's very important to understand that this isn't a film in 2025. This is 1988. So the inception of the film, like I said, is based on a real person, two real people actually. So the writer of the film, whose name is Barry Morrow, based it on a person named Kim Peck, who was described as a savant. Kim was actually thought to have autism due to his difficulties with social interaction and then things like functional stuff like buttoning his shirt and things like that. He didn't rate on like IQ tests in a way that was like typical. So he had an incredible memory and was able to recall like incredible detail of things. However, he scored like an 87 on like a typical IQ test. They did studies on his brain later in his life through MRs and CTs, and they concluded that he probably had something called FG syndrome, which is not autism, but he was thought to have autism, in 1988 when they were developing this film. And like I said, both Dustin Hoffman and Barry Morrow spent a long time with him and really tried to create as much nuance and understanding for him that could be put into the film. Barry Morrow also based Raymond on his friend named Bill Sachter, who was diagnosed with subnormal intelligence back in 1920 when he was having difficulty in school. He was then deemed a burden into society and was sent to Faribault State School for the feeble-minded and the epileptic. This is how far we've come, guys. He remained there for 44 years until 1964 when they started undoing some of the institutionalization. He never saw his mother and sister again after he was pulled in 1920. Yeah. Horrific. Once he was sort of released, he went to a halfway house. It was discovered that they never taught him to read or write or even do things like use a telephone. He became a handyman, and this is where he became friends with Barry Morrow, and eventually Barry became his guardian. When Barry moved to Iowa to work at the university there, Bill went with him and actually ended up opening up a coffee shop in this environment. He really, really thrived. He ended up receiving special recognition in 1979 from Jimmy Carter and died in 1983. So we'll get into casting. So Charlie Babbitt is the younger brother who is kind of one of the main protagonists of the film. He is played by Tom Cruise, and Tom Cruise has this like intense energy that is perfect for Charlie Babbitt. This is kind of he's meant to have this energy of like a Gordon Gekko, like a total 80s yuppie, push, 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 push capitalism. Like that's kind of his vibe. And that's played to perfection by Tom Cruise, because I do feel like Tom Cruise has this underlying kind of crazy intensity that is perfect for the character. In my opinion, this is the best Tom Cruise has ever been in a film. He's excellent. Initially, real life brothers Randy and Dennis Quaid were considered for Charlie and Raymond, but that didn't go through. Mickey Rourke was offered the part of Charlie Babbitt and turned it down. And then initially, Dustin Hoffman was actually considered for Charlie with Bill Murray to play Raymond. And I am so glad that didn't happen, because I just don't feel like Bill Murray is capable of an actor of having that kind of nuance. And I would worry that Bill Murray would almost make kind of like a joke or a mockery of it. Dustin Hoffman plays Raymond. It was also offered to Mel Gibson. Also glad that doesn't happen. I don't find Mel Gibson to be a particularly nuanced or an actor with a ton of range. Dustin Hoffman has talked a lot about his desire to have Raymond be as well-rounded as he could, and a desire to have as many kind of characteristics that were accurate and authentic to someone with autism as possible. Dustin Hoffman spent a year preparing for the role, spending time with 3 different men who had autism in order to understand it as best that he could. So he spent time with disabled individuals in New York Psychiatric Institute when he was younger. And then he was able to kind of draw his mannerisms from a multitude of people, including Peter Guthrie, who is the autistic brother of Kevin Guthrie, a football player. Another person was Joseph Sullivan, who was the son of Dr. Ruth Sullivan, who's the founding member of the Autism Society of America, which does have its problems. They did initially kind of accept the misinformation about the vaccines causing autism. So there is some controversy with them. They have since retracted that and no longer advocate for that. But I recommend kind of doing your own research. I'm not going to get too far into that, but that isn't a group of people that is backed by the autistic community as a whole. But at the time, Dr. Ruth Sullivan was kind of one of the leading advocacies for disabled people because of her son. And obviously, like, that came from a place of wanting to have better advocacy and information and help for people in the autism community as well as other disabilities. And then the third inspiration for Dustin Hoffman was Kim Peek himself. And he spent tons of time trying to understand him, learn as much about him, and then used a lot of his mannerisms in order to give an accurate portrayal. Dustin Hoffman, there's interviews that you can watch on YouTube and stuff where he talks a lot about not wanting to kind of make a mockery of autism, wanting to be authentic. Again, when watching these, understand that these interviews are from the 1980s. So some of the language is rough. And there also is, the misconceptions that were at the time. Dustin Hoffman talks about autistic people not having a desire for connection, which since we know now that that's not true, it's just a different way of connecting. Dustin Hoffman talks a lot about the difficulty in playing Raymond, because a lot of the ways that he works as an actor is by eye contact and connecting that way. And so he had to learn a different way of connecting into the film that he actually didn't lock into until 2 or 3 weeks into. And when he was watching the dailies in his first 2 or 3 weeks, said, I'm not there. I'm not Raymond. I'm not locked in. Like, I am not being authentic. So we worked closely with the director, like trying to lock in is how he describes it. Be in Raymond wholeheartedly and not be just doing like a pale imitation or stereotype a bit. And I think that's a really excellent observation from him, and like quite responsible to be like, no, we need to continue to shoot these. We need to redo these scenes. They kicked a lot of stuff to the end of the production for Dustin Hoffman and Raymond, because when they did the initial shots, he was like, this isn't good enough. This isn't an accurate enough portrayal, and I don't want to put that out there. And like, how amazing for an actor that didn't know a lot about autism or anything like that until he started. And then in the interviews and stuff, he talks a lot about the harm of institutionalization, and talks in the interviews about how we need to learn more about autism. And that's coming from 1988. So just want to commend Dustin Hoffman for that. He's excellent. He ended up winning an Academy Award for this, which is well deserved. This is one of my favorite performances of all time, obviously, because I have a personal connection with the film. Although Raymond is not accurate portrayal of everybody on the spectrum, that's impossible because of all the variances. For me, this is very much how autism looks in my household for this person. There's so much. My husband and I watched this, and we couldn't help but just like smile ear to ear at this performance from Dustin Hoffman, because there's so much that reminded us of like this person that we love. And yeah, it was so heartwarming, and so like just this profound like flood of gratitude of like, how beautiful is it to see this person that we love so much reflected to us on the screen, and have this example of someone who's neurodiverse being portrayed in a way that includes no mockery and includes like a desire from the writer, the director, the actors to have it be as nuanced as possible and as like displayed with like love as possible. That means so much to me. This movie was received well. Roger Ebert said, Hoffman proves again that he almost seems to thrive on acting challenges. I felt a love for Raymond and the Hoffman character. I don't know quite how Hoffman got me to do that. Gene Siskel says, the strength of this film is really that Cruise's performance and the combinations of superior performances makes the movie worth watching. Amy Dawes wrote, one of the year's most intriguing film premises is given an uneven, slightly off-target treatment. She called the road scene tastefully and loosely written with much extraneous screen time, but admired the last third of the film, calling a depiction of two very isolated beings who discover a common history and a deep attachment. I don't agree with like the like discussion of sort of an uneven tone or just the performances, because it is important, these nuanced things that Raymond has to do throughout the film for Tom Cruise to understand Raymond's particular support needs with autism. This is about Charlie, or Tom Cruise's character, learning. I believe this is a direct correlation to how little autism was understood by the general public in 1988. I think, you know, through the lens of 2025, although we have those other problems we discussed earlier, this is so important to Raymond and the character of Raymond to understand. And I think sort of the last thing we need to discuss is there is still some controversy, especially now as we begin to kind of grow as a society, about having, you know, actors that do not have, you know, disabilities portraying disabled people. And so that is something that we're discussing a lot more in, you know, 2025 than we were in 1988. And I think, you know, I'll give a quote from the director of the film, Barry Levinson. And so his vision of the film and his thing that he wanted was, if I can show the autism for what it is and understand it, and then show the further frustration and the humor, if I can make the relationship work with these two guys on the road, that's enough for me. And I think that very much is the tone and the through line of the story. Is the most important thing is finding the connection between these two brothers, and you know, showing autism as accurate of a portrayal as we can in 1988. I hope I was able to talk about this in as like nuanced of a way. Obviously, I'm always open to as much learning as possible. You know, this is always coming from a place of love, and please understand that this is coming from, you know, I have a personal experience. A person in my household has autism. So this is, you know, obviously I don't have diagnosed autism, so take that with a grain of salt. But, you know, this comes from a place of love and understanding and want to advocate. Obviously, going forward, we can do more than Rain Man, especially in 2025. We're able to tell a lot more nuanced stories. Let's advocate for those with autism to tell their own stories. But we have to credit Raymond for being the first of his kind and for, bringing attention to autism to the mainstream. So many people did not know that autism exists. They didn't understand institutionalization. And this is the first time they were seeing this displayed, and it gave them kind of a face to autism in this lovely character that was tried to be as fleshed out as possible by everybody in the film. And, autism is never displayed as this terrible thing throughout the film. It comes from a place of love. And I love this movie. I've seen it many, many times. I think it's incredible. So we're going to get into the plot. So the plot starts off with Charlie Babbitt. So he is kind of an importer of these high-end cars, Lamborghinis. And this is like the go, 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 push, 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 capitalism, capitalism, sell, 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 make as much money as possible. His fiance, Susanna, works for him. She seems like this very lovely, warm person who's just trying to connect with Charlie. Charlie's extremely walled off. There's a scene where they're talking about his father. He left home at 16 and never spoke to his father again. This is all a fallout from a car that Charlie stole from his father to take out for a joyride. The father reported him to the police, and he was arrested for like 2 days, and his dad didn't bail him out. And then he left home and never to turn back. Charlie's trying to sell these cars, and he's unable to they're not able to pass the emissions test in order for him to sell them. So he is, on the hook for a bunch of money for people that have already paid him and are expecting these cars to be delivered. So we learned that the father has died, and his father's quite wealthy. And so he's going to go to the funeral and, deal with the will and see if he gets any money. So him and Susanna travel to Cincinnati to settle the estate. And he learns that he only inherits the car that he had swiped and the rose bushes, which is a 1949 Buick Roadmaster convertible. And the remainder of the estate, which is $3 million, which obviously that's what Charlie Babbitt would like to help pay off his debts and then, move forward with his business, has been given to an unnamed trustee. And it's been the unnamed trustee, he learns through a kind of like interrogating a few people, is the director of a mental institution. So he goes to the mental institution to speak with this director, this doctor. And, as he's speaking to the doctor, Susanna's waiting in the car, as she often does for Charlie. And a patient, gets in. And he is talking about how it's his dad's car. And he says, I drive this on Saturdays, definitely not on Mondays. Like, he's very confused as to why the car's here. Charlie comes out of the institution after kind of getting nowhere and sees this man in the front seat. And this man is able to recall incredible detail of the car, and says that he knows this car, and that the seats used to be red leather or they used to be brown, and now they're the horrible red. And Charlie's kind of trying to talk to this guy, and this guy says, "Oh, this is DAD's car, DAD, Dad, DAD." And he said, "Who's your dad?" And he says, "Sanford Babbitt." And that's, of course, Charlie's dad's name. And so Charlie's trying to talk to him, and this character is like, won't make eye contact, isn't really engaging, and he kind of walks off, and he's like, Jeopardy's at 5:00, I gotta go inside. And so he goes up the stairs, and the director comes out, and the director's name is Dr. Gerald Bruner. And he tells Charlie about Raymond, that it's his brother, and that he was institutionalized when Charlie was younger. And this is why Dr. Bruder has inherited this money in order to fund Raymond and take care of him for the rest of his life. He learns that Raymond is what is called an autistic savant, and that he has extremely strict routines. He follows everything to a T. He shows little emotional expression except when in distress. And so they go in and they go to Raymond's room, and Charlie's trying to talk to him, and Susanna's trying to talk to him. And they are disrupting Raymond's stuff. They're looking at his baseball cards, at his books. Raymond is able to recall, incredible detail of Shakespeare and different things, but he's unable to recall like a lot of like kind of functional things. It's clear he doesn't understand the concept of money and things like that. And so as they're discussing Raymond with one of his key workers, whose name is Vern Raymond begins to do the Who's On First. And for my younger viewers, I don't know if you know that, it's an Abbott and Costello bit. Initially started as a vaudeville. And so it's sort of a joke routine, but Raymond doesn't understand that. And so when he gets anxious, it's one of his ways of coping, which now we know is called and so the more Charlie and Susanna disrupt his stuff, the more Raymond begins some of his stims, which includes rocking and repeating this. And Vern, the worker's trying to explain it. And, you know, Raymond, he's trying to help Raymond kind of soothe himself. Vern, and then, you know, Raymond spells his name, which he often does, V-E-R, Vern, bounces Raymond from the mental institution by kind of luring him down to look at the ducks, which is part of Raymond's regular routine. And Raymond goes to, you know, when they're down looking at the ducks, Raymond actually isn't looking at the ducks. He's kind of in his own little world. But as, you know, as we know now, like, you know, Raymond might not be looking at the ducks in this like neurotypical experience of it, but he is having his own experience with this. But Charlie doesn't understand that. And where this movie kind of excels in a lot of bits is with Tom Cruise's portrayal of Charlie and this incredible non-understanding of autism and this frustration, which is also something that I think either the general public or people when family members are immediately diagnosed or not diagnosed yet, and this like frustration with like this locked in routine and this feeling of frustration is, why aren't you just like me? Why aren't you just the way that other people are? Why you have difficulty? And there's a lot of that. And that's really hard to watch. But I do feel like it's very accurate reflection of a lot of those struggles that we have in society or that people have as family members and when dealing with autism. And it's so difficult to watch. This is where he uses a lot of language that is like really outdated and is very, very difficult. So Charlie brings Raymond out and they got to make it back to LA. So they go to a hotel overnight. And Susanna, he's lied to Susanna saying that the Dr. Brunner said it would be good to spend time with Raymond. But obviously Raymond is in a lot of distress because he's disrupted from his regular routine. He has a very strict like television schedule that he sticks with. You know, he needs his pepperoni pizza because that's what they eat on Mondays at the institution. He's in distress. Charlie is extremely frustrated. Susanna is trying to display as much compassion for Raymond as possible. So they have to arrange the hotel room to look like Raymond's bedroom. He likes his bed by the window and things, and Charlie's just so frustrated. So they go to bed. Raymond goes to bed because lights out are at 11, and Charlie and Susanna have sex. Raymond doesn't understand the noises that are happening, and he kind of walks in on them. Charlie yells at him, and Susanna kicks Charlie out of the bed, and she's like, look, like, he doesn't understand what's happening. He's scared. Like, you need to go talk to him and comfort your brother. He's scared. So instead of comforting Raymond, Charlie goes and screams at him and calls him an idiot. And Susanna is disgusted by Charlie, as she should be. It's horrific. It's horrific to watch. It made me cry. It's awful. And Susanna leaves. And she's like, I'm not doing this. This is very clearly that you've lied to me. There's no way Dr. Brunner would want this for Raymond. You're just in this for the money. This is disgusting. And she leaves. So then Charlie and Dr. Brunner have a conversation over the phone, and he basically says he'll exchange Raymond for his half of the money. Dr. Brunner refuses, and then Charlie decides he's going to gain custody of Raymond, and so he can control the money. Charlie decides to take it back to LA, and that's where they'll get in court. So this next scene is where we go to an airport. And this is where we see, you know, Raymond have his first display, complete sensory overload, and has like a complete sort of meltdown. He's very scared to fly. He lists all the different airlines that have crashed, and he won't get on a plane. He's extremely scared. And Charlie grabs him, and he's like, why do you always have to act like such an R word? And pulls him. And Raymond just, you know, loses control. And then Charlie is scared and taken aback. And he, like, this is the first time we're starting to click tiny amounts with Charlie, like how difficult Raymond's experience can be when knocked off his routine. Obviously, Charlie doesn't like take any steps forward really, other than he agrees that they're not going to fly, they're going to drive from Cincinnati to LA. They are slow to drive across the country to LA because Raymond has to stick to a lot of his routines. And this includes like he must watch the People's Court every day. He must go to bed by 11. He must eat the certain things that they eat at the institution in order to thrive. He refuses to travel one day when it's raining, and he will not get on the interstate to drive. They have to take the back roads. And there's a little moment where Raymond kind of like is, they are driving past a car accident, and Raymond gets very overwhelmed and he gets out of the car. The way that the director and the sound is done in this and the editing is amazing. It's amazing because what they try to display to the audience and what they're attempting to give you is Raymond's point of view of this absolute sensory overload. And you feel so overstimulated watching it. It's trying to give this understanding. This is what Raymond's experiencing. And like, this is why we need to support Raymond and do some of these things to help him cope and navigate the world. You know, with his action, the sound of the film gets cranked up and the lights are flashing. There's really fast editing, and he gets out of the car and he gets lost. And Charlie jumps out of the car too, trying to go and get Raymond, and the police sort of block him, and Raymond keeps walking. And then he, you know, is so overwhelmed. He refuses to get into the car. He starts doing his who's on first thing. And he's like, I'm not doing this. I'm not going on the interstate. And Charlie says, okay. And so they walk on the side of the interstate until they get off to the back road. Charlie drives behind Raymond and Raymond walks. And then once they get off the interstate, Raymond gets in. There's also one of the funny scenes of the film that I really love is Raymond obviously didn't have enough clothes. So he needs spare underwear. So Charlie gives him his underwear. And they're driving, and Raymond kind of admits that he's not wearing the underwear. It's in his pocket because he only wears underwear from Kmart. And then he keeps repeating the Kmart that they need to go back to so Raymond can get more underwear. And Charlie and him are kind of having this like argument. And Charlie's like, look, Raymond, like Kmart sucks. Like you're not wearing, like if you're not, you know, they have this whole argument about underwear, and Raymond like throws Charlie's underwear out of the car. It's just this like little like sweet funny little scene where like Charlie's, these little moments that I think are so important on the road trip where Charlie's starting to understand like this is Raymond's routine, like this, we have to stick to this. Like it's really cute. I love it. And we start to learn more about Raymond and sort of his, you know, Raymond's like real strengths. And one of them is when they're having dinner or they're having breakfast at this diner, and Raymond like can't get past the fact that there isn't syrup on the table when they arrive to order his pancakes. And Charlie's really frustrated with him, and he grabs the back of his neck and pulls him, and he's like, why do you have to act like such an R word? And this is horrible language to watch. It's really jarring. And then Raymond writes down his little grievance of Charlie in his book. And like immediately following this, the waitress comes over. She's got her name tag. It's Sally Dibbs. And Raymond reads the name tag and repeats her phone number because Raymond the night before in the hotel read the phone book up to G. And of course, Dibbs is there and he memorized it. And so Charlie sees this like stark contrast with like Raymond can't get past it. Like the syrup isn't on the table. But like, there's no way Charlie could ever memorize a phone book in his life if they gave him months. There's no way. So he's starting to see this like these strengths that Raymond actually kind of displays and has, and some of these like amazing things about Raymond. And that's what we learn about Raymond like through the course of this journey. Another point, they drop toothpicks. Sally drops toothpicks. Raymond is able to count them just kind of by looking down. And this is like one of the very famous scenes that, you know, later people in the autistic community talk about being like kind of negative, is like people assuming that they can count stuff at like crazy levels and things like that. And I actually forgot to talk about it at the beginning. Sort of one of the opening scenes is Charlie talks about his imaginary friend with Suzanne when he was a kid called the Rain Man. And the Rain Man would sing to him and make his pain go away. I should have said that at the beginning, but there's about to be a callback to it. And so one of the nights in the hotel rooms, Raymond is brushing his teeth and Charlie's kind of trying to talk to him. And he's trying to talk to him about and Charlie realizes that Raymond is Raymond. Raymond describes this as, you know, the day that Raymond left, Charlie was waving at the window, bye-bye Rain Man, bye-bye Rain Man. Because it's Charlie's like toddler way of saying Raymond. And it was Raymond who used to sing the Beatles to Charlie. And so Charlie's memory or his imaginary friend that he found comfort with as a kid is actually just his early memories of Raymond, which is it's such a beautiful scene. And I think it does display this like connection that Raymond had with Charlie. Although Charlie didn't remember Raymond, Raymond never forgot Charlie and how important Charlie was and the connection that he had with Charlie. It's so beautiful. And then it flips to a moment where Charlie's trying to like turn on the bath because he's gonna have a bath and the water's too hot. And Raymond has like this like he gets extremely overwhelmed and screams and turns off the water. And freaks out. He said, never hurt Charlie Babbitt. Don't put the baby in the water. Don't put the baby in the water. And the realization that Raymond had saved Charlie from being scalded by hot water one day, but Stanford blamed Raymond for nearly injuring Charlie. And that's when he committed Raymond to the hospital. And because Raymond was unable to speak up for himself and correct the misunderstanding, he was institutionalized for years and years and years and kept a secret. When Raymond actually was trying to save Charlie from this hot water. And like Charlie, this is where Charlie like really starts to like, this is a heavyweight and sort of the ball drops for Charlie about what has really happened in this like horrible thing that his father did that was all a reaction to a misunderstanding when Raymond was there for Charlie, was looking out for Charlie, did all these things to sing to Charlie, and then provided comfort without Charlie really knowing that all throughout his childhood being the Rain Man. We then have a scene where Charlie takes Raymond to a doctor. You know, he wants to understand Raymond's kind of abilities with numbers and things like that. And so he goes to a kind of a psychiatrist in this small town, and he's talking with the nurse on the initial intake, and she's never heard of autism. And she says, what's wrong with him? And Charlie doesn't have an answer because there isn't anything wrong with Raymond. He has these things that he needs support with, but there is not anything wrong with Raymond. And then we have the scene where we flip to the doctor talking about autism, and there's some things that are very true and some things that are not true at all. This is where we learn a little bit more about Raymond's like amazing ability for counting, but his inability to understand like the concept of money. But I love this scene particularly for this thing where the nurse is like, what's wrong with you? What's wrong with him? And Charlie has no answer because there is nothing wrong with Raymond. So Charlie's creditors, he gets news from LA that they've repossessed him in Lamborghini and he needs to pay up to the buyers now. And so he decides that he's going to bet it all in Vegas. And so him and Raymond go, Charlie pawns his watch, and they kind of use Raymond's numbers ability for counting cards, and they end up winning $86,000 in Vegas. There's also a scene where Raymond accidentally speaks to a sex worker and mistakes it for an actual date. And so he insists to Charlie that he needs to learn how to dance for his date. And there's this really beautiful scene where Charlie teaches Raymond to dance. And we kind of discover more about Raymond's like love for music. And this is really true to the person in my life, that music is this like amazing experience that they have that's, you know, dance is their great joy. So I love this scene, and particularly Suzanne then comes back and meets them in Vegas, and her and Charlie kind of have this reconciliation, and she's very touched by Charlie's connection with Raymond that he has developed over the course of this. There is also this very weird scene where Suzanne talks to Raymond about whether or not he's ever kissed a girl, and she kisses Raymond, and I don't love this because I think we need to talk about like, is Raymond actually able to consent to this? It's very ambiguous. He doesn't push Susanna away, but I don't know. It kind of left me feeling yucky. I don't know how other people feel about it. Anyway, so Charlie successfully wins his $86,000, and then they leave Las Vegas. And when they return to LA, Charlie meets with Dr. Berner, who offers him $250,000 to walk away from Raymond forever. Charlie refuses and says he's no longer upset about being cut from the will. He just doesn't want to lose this connection with Raymond. He wants to have a relationship. He wants his brother to live with him. Then the morning of the hearing about whether or not Raymond is going to be able to live with Charlie, which was his initial plan to get the money, but he doesn't want the money anymore. He just wants to be with his brother and to, he's lost all this time with his brother. He doesn't want to lose any more time. Raymond is trying to use a toaster oven and nearly burns down the house. We have another amazing scene of fast editing, increased sound, where we experience sensory overload at the same time Raymond does. And Charlie sort of has this inkling that he might not be able to take care of Raymond in the way that he needs to. He's not going to be able to provide the amount of support that Raymond needs to. So at the hearing, there's questioning to Raymond about where he wants to live. Raymond kind of responds that he wants to live with Charlie and the institution. It's clear he's unable to consent. The way that the attorney is questioning Raymond also provides us with another level of too much sensory input. I think that's very smart, the way the dialogue is done, where you feel like Raymond, he's being very overwhelmed. There's fast questions, fast questions, fast questions, fast questions. I think that's done to perfection, and it's very intentional. And ultimately, Charlie comes to the realization that Raymond is going to get better support at the institution than he is with Charlie. Charlie stops the incessant questioning and agrees to that. And then there's this beautiful moment where Raymond calls Charlie his main man, and they have this moment of connection. And they haven't been able to make physical contact to all this point. And Charlie's sitting next to him and is telling him that, he loves this time that they've spent and that he's going to see him and he wants this connection and that he's going to visit him every couple weeks. And Raymond leans in and touches foreheads with Charlie. And this is the way that my family member connects with me, as we touch foreheads when they desire connection physically. It isn't often done by hugs as much, but it is this like connection with the forehead. So that made me like bawl, because I love that, and it felt so authentic to me in my experience. And it must have been an authentic way that one of the people that Dustin Hoffman, uh, one of the people that he learned about autism with must have been one of their real life things. So I loved that. And the film ends with Raymond boarding the train and returning to the institution, and Charlie promising to visit in 2 weeks. Now, this is like another discussion we could have about institutionalization and whether or not that's more harm than good. Obviously, the institutionalization at this point was still super, super prevalent. It's very clear Dr. Broder believes he's doing his best and supporting Raymond, and Raymond very much does need more support than Charlie's able to give him. I think we could have a much more nuanced discussion about that in 2025. Obviously, our goal in 2025 for people with autism is for them to have as much support and as much integration into the community as possible. This was not the way it was in 1988. So I think it's clear that the intention of the end of the film is that Raymond gets the support he needs, and that Charlie chooses not to be selfish and to keep Raymond, that he doesn't want the money, that he wants to do the best for Raymond, and that he wants Raymond to be where he gets the supports for his routine. And then Charlie realizes he's unable to do that, but he still wants his connection with his brother. And that's how the film ends. I find this to be a deeply beautiful and moving film. Obviously, it has its drawbacks. Let's not pretend it doesn't, but that is the movie. And so, let's celebrate Autism Awareness Month. Let's do our best to be as accepting in society and do our best to learn. Again, we're learning from reputable sources and medically and scientifically backed sources. I hope everybody has a lovely day, and I'll see you for a regular episode on Thursday, which is Silver Linings Playbook. Have a great day, everybody.